All right, I am here with my man, Jim Kwik. Jim, it's great to be with you.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
We are actually at your conference, the Superhero Brain Conference, and it's been incredible.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, it's really a mission for us to be able to help people to unleash more of their superpowers.
Yes. Yeah, can you start out by giving us a little bit of context?
Sure.
I mean, you're obviously a brain memory expert, but what led you into this space?
Oh, good. So when people see me do demonstrations on stage, if I memorize, they'll see me memorize a room full of people's names, like 100 people or 100 words forwards and backwards or 100 numbers. I always tell people I don't do this to impress them. I do this to express them what's really possible, because every single person who's watching this conversation, participating in this, could do it also, no matter their age or their background, their career, their diet, their level of education. It doesn't matter. It's just we aren't taught that. And what we are taught is a lie. Or a myth, a lie that our potential, our memory, our learning, our intelligence is somehow fixed, like our shoe size, and it's absolutely not true. I mean, we've discovered more over the past 20 years than the previous 2,000 years about the human brain and really what it's capable of. And what we know is it has this incredible capacity to learn and absorb and focus and create and remember things. It's just we're not shown how. And I know this for a fact because growing up, to answer your question, I actually grew up with really severe learning challenges. People don't know, but I had a head injury when I was 5 years old, and I had learning challenges that resulted from it. I mean, teachers would have to explain things 3 or 4 or 5 times, and I still wouldn't understand. It would take me longer. I'd have to work 2 or 3 times harder than everybody else. I didn't have focus. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't remember things. It actually, for when it came to my reading, it actually took me an extra 3 years just to learn how to read something. And so at that age, it's such a frustrating struggle. And so all through school, elementary school, middle school, junior high, even through high school, it's something I dealt with privately and publicly. And it's a tough struggle when you think like, I was the boy with the broken brain. And then when I got to college, I really wanted to show my family that I could do it. I wanted to prove to the world, prove to myself that I was worth something, and I thought I'd start fresh.
It impacted your self-worth, I imagine, growing up.
Completely.
School, yeah.
And I think part of our identity is based on like how we feel, how smart we are. And when you feel like, and I really found since then, it's not really how smart you are, it's how are you smart, right? It's not how smart you are, your children or your loved ones, it's really how are you smart, and discovering that. And really my life's work is really about discovering people's superpowers. And I think one of the greatest superpowers we have is this, this superhero, this peak mind, if you will.
Yeah.
It's what makes us different than, when every creature on Earth has a superpower. Some could fly, some could climb, some could breathe underwater, but human beings were not particularly strong or particularly fast, but we have our mind, our ability to solve problems, to create, to innovate, to affect the world around us. And that's what's really fascinating. The challenge is when we're talking about the human brain, the brain doesn't come with an owner's manual, and it's not always user-friendly. And so when I got to college, I couldn't keep up, and it actually got worse. And I thought I was going to start fresh, but it actually, it got even more frustrating. And at that time, I was ready to quit school, and I didn't know how to tell my parents because they sacrificed a lot. They immigrated here, and they worked many jobs, and I didn't want to disappoint them, but I had so much pressure. And at that time, my friend said, hey, why don't you visit, I'm going to go visit my family this weekend. Why don't you come with and get some perspective? And I really think perspective is really, really key. Last night, we had Quincy Jones here, and we were talking about, you have to go to know. Because when you change place or you change people, it gives you a new outlook on problems, right? And sometimes it's one of those things, and I'll talk about the phrase that actually changed my life. Well, I was ready to quit, so I decided to go on this trip, across country to see my friend's family over the weekend, and they were very wealthy, and not just financially wealthy, but they were very happy, right? And they were connected, and they're making a difference in their community. And the father walks me around his property right before dinner and asked me a very innocent question. The question was, how's school? Which is pretty much the worst question you could ask me at that time.
Sure.
And I just break down and I start crying to this complete stranger, and I tell him my story and how I have these learning challenges and I'm quitting school and I don't know how to tell my family. And I was really depressed about it. And he's asked me another question, and I think questions are the answer. I think ask a new question, you get a new answer because it controls our focus. And so he asked me the other question saying, well, why are you in school? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? What do you want to have, share? And I didn't really have an answer for that. But he kept on asking and he persisted. And I start to answer him and he stops me and he takes out of his back pocket a journal and he takes out a couple of sheets of paper. And I've noticed some of the most successful people that we get to work with, they journal. Right? You think about, and I don't know if it's because that successful people, they just because they're successful they journal, or maybe because they're journaling that helps make them more successful. That reflection of note taking and note making. Anyway, it takes a couple pieces of paper and makes me write down this bucket list of all the things that I want to be able to have and create and share and be. And when I was done, I started folding it up and thinking I could just put it in my pocket. He grabs it out of my hand, Michael, and he starts looking at it and starts reading it. And I'm really honestly freaking out because I just met this man, a complete stranger. He's looking at my intimate, vulnerable...
Your life dreams.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And when he's done, he says, Jim, you are this close to everything on that list. And I'm thinking, there's no way. Give me 10 lifetimes and I'm not going to crack that list. And he goes like this, right to the side of the temples here, meaning that it was my mind, it was my brain, right? And so he takes me into a room of his home that I'd never seen before, and it's wall to wall, ceiling to floor, covered in books. I mean, can you imagine? It's like a library in someone's home, which I've never seen. And he starts grabbing books and handing them to me. And I started looking at the titles, and there are these they're biographies of incredible men and women in history, and some really early personal growth books. And so I started looking at it. I was like, wow, that's interesting. And he's like, Jim, I want you to read one of these books a week. And I'm thinking, have you not been listening to what I was saying? I'm learning challenge. I haven't ever finished a book cover to cover. And then I was like, I can't do it. And plus, I have all this schoolwork. And he looks me right in the eye and he says, Jim, don't let school get in the way of your education. And I didn't realize that was a Mark Twain quote. This was a couple decades ago. But I was like, that's true, sir. And yet I really still can't do it. And then he's a very smart man. He takes out of his pocket my bucket list, which he still has, and he starts to read my dreams, my goals, my desires out loud, one by one. And something about hearing another stranger who's obviously very successful incant into the universe, like my, these aspirations. And honestly, I mean, it shook my soul, something fierce. And honestly, half the stuff on there was things I wanted to do for and with my family that they would never or could never do for themselves. And I just, with that motivation, and I think motivation is very important for learning, and getting in touch with things that are focus of your mind, is I agree to read one book a week. And I go back now I'm at school again, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I have a pile of books that I have to read for school, and a pile of books that I promised to read, and I just can't keep up. So then I don't eat, I don't sleep, I just live in the library. And that's not very sustainable. Into it, I ended up passing out in the library one night. I fall down a flight of stairs. I hit my head again, and I wake up in the hospital. This is 2 days later now, I find out. And I'm down to 117 pounds. And it's the darkest time of my life. And, wow, even talking about it. I was hooked up to these IVs, and I just thought there has to be a better way. And when I had that thought, the nurse came in with a mug of tea, and it had a picture of Albert Einstein, who's the icon of like the mind or the brain. And I felt like that was the opposite of who I was. And it had a quote from Einstein. It said, the same level of thinking that's created your problem will not solve your problem. The same level of thinking that's created your problem won't solve your problem. And it made me think a new question again. What's my problem? Oh, I'm a really slow learner. How do I think differently about it? Well, maybe I can learn how to learn. And that's when I dedicated my life to really understanding how the brain works so I could work my brain. And I started studying adult learning theory and multiple intelligences and everything I could get my hands on, memory and speed reading and everything. And 60 days into it, a light switch just went on and my mind felt like it was activated. And I started to understand things. I started to have better focus. I started to be able to read faster and remember things. And my grades improved. And then also I got my life. I got the life I deserved to be able to have. And then from that point, I couldn't help but help other people. When you have that kind of life change, and I started to help tutor people. And one of my very first students, she was a college freshman, and she ended up reading 30 books in 30 days. Can you imagine? Like,
incredible. Like,
that's amazing. Who does that? And I wanted to find out not how, I know how she did it, but I want to know why. And I found out that her mother was dying of terminal cancer, was given 60 days to live, and the books she was reading were books to save her mom's life. And I get a call 6 months later. from this young lady, and she's crying tears of joy. I find out that her mother not only survived, but is really getting better. Doctors don't know how, they don't know why. They call it a miracle, but her mother attributes it 100% to the great advice she got from her daughter that learned it from all these books. And that's where I learned that if knowledge is power, then learning is your superpower. That if knowledge is power, learning is your superpower. And I've dedicated my life ever since to helping people learn better.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it evokes several things in me. One was the fact that this woman dedicated herself to reach the extraordinary through her dedication to her mother, and even your story of family really being your motive. And I thought about Viktor Frankl, and he talked about Man's Search for Meaning. Those that made it through the camps, which were just so horrific I can't even imagine, were the ones who had someone else that they were living for. So that's incredibly powerful. So I know now you've dedicated yourself to learning, to memory, to the brain and its possibilities. Mm-hmm. For those who are watching that are really looking to unlock their own potential, what kind of tips? Because I know you have several. I mean, I've seen you can memorize, and one of the things I've realized is I remember meeting Bill Clinton, and the fact that he went from talking to me to then meeting someone he had met once 3 years ago, remembering their name, and then going and talking to the janitor, remembering his name. I was blown away by the power of names and remembering someone's name, and that's always been something I've struggled with. What are some of the tips that you can give people to enhance their memory, and obviously some of the things that they can apply in their lives that will have a profound effect?
Absolutely, and I think if there's a skill to master, for your career, and especially in business, the number one business etiquette skill is remembering people's names. Mm-hmm. Because how are you going to show somebody you're going to care about them, or care about their health, or care about their future, their family, or their finances, whatever it is that you're offering them, if you don't just care enough just to remember them and their name and the people close to them. So I think when you're talking about President Clinton, it's a leadership skill, right, to be able to do that. It shows that you care. Because when we forget someone's name once or twice or three times, it sends a message to people that they're not important, and that might not be the case. It's just we aren't taught, because they don't teach you in school. They have 3 R's in school: reading, writing, arithmetic. But what about remembering? What about retention? What about recall? So I always tell people there's 3 keys for improving your memory. And if you forget something, like where you put something or someone's name or a PIN number, whatever it is, usually one of these 3 things is missing. So I call it MOM. And MOM, and we use acronyms because it helps people remember things. The M, it's surprising. Like, I think 95% of the people are self-admitted, challenges with names. But if we had like a suitcase here of $100,000 cash for them or their favorite charity, if you just remember the person's name or the next person you meet, I think everyone's going to remember that person's name, right? Mm-hmm. And so it had nothing to do with capability or your potential. Everyone becomes a memory expert when they're motivated, and that's what the M stands for: motivation. I think I recently did a talk in Silicon Valley, and afterwards Bill Gates comes up to me, and we have this interesting conversation about the future of education. And I'm talking about accelerated learning theory, and he's talking about technology, and we're talking about how that collides and converges. And then somebody listening to the conversation says, well, what's missing? Is there anything missing? And we both think for a little bit, and we say, motivation. Because a lot of people know what to do, but they're not doing those things. And so
individual motivation or systemic motivation?
Both. Right, because I think, like, if, for example, we have students online, speed reading memory students in 150 countries, and I tell people that we can help anyone improve as long as they have 2 things: that they're open-minded, right, and they're motivated. And meaning that someone could be very motivated, but if they're not open-minded, they're not going to learn something new. Or someone could be open-minded, but if they're not motivated to learn something, they're not going to get the, if their motivation on a scale of 0 to 10 is 0, 0 times anything is going to be 0. So what I tell people to do is find your why. We talked about the why of this young woman, or Viktor Frankl. Everyone has their why, and some people don't have a why. It's something simple like, why do you remember one person's name? And you could say to yourself, why do I want to remember this person's name? Maybe it's to show the person respect. Maybe it's to connect with another human being. Maybe it's to make a new friend, or to do some business, or maybe it's just to practice these tips from Jim Kwik. But if you can't come up with a reason, you won't remember. But if you could come up with a reason, here's the tweetable: reasons reap results. Reasons reap results. I have a formula, I call it H cubed: head, heart, hands. That if you have something in your mind, you could affirm it and visualize it and set goals around it. But if it just stays here and not happens with your hands, you're not acting on it, usually what's missing is the second H, which is the heart, right? The emotion, the energy of motion. And so tuning into that definitely helps people. And so that's motivation. The O, you'll appreciate this. The O stands for observation. Observation. And this is the mindfulness, right? This is being present with somebody, because a lot of people, they blame, when they forget someone's name, they blame their retention. When it's not their retention, it's their attention. It's not a matter of retention, it's a matter of attention. So many people come to events and you meet them, and then you're getting their name, and your brain is this unbelievable. You have the incredible superhero mind, and yet what happens is, you can remember like one word. It's a name, right? So it's 2 words. But a lot of people aren't even paying attention. What are they doing? They're looking over your shoulders. They're having a conversation with themselves, right? You mentioned President Clinton. Every opportunity I've had to meet him, he same thing. He remembers your name, right? He remembers the last conversation. He could pick up where you left off, and that's amazing. And I remember asking him, I was like, President Clinton, like, how do you do it? Like, what memory techniques are you using? And he tells me this story about his grandfather in Arkansas would get the kids around and tell stories to them, but not just let it stop there. He would actually quiz them and ask them questions to see if they were actually paying attention, right? And so when you're with someone like a President Clinton, we were at a charity event for 2,000 people recently, and we were sitting together, and it was like me, Forrest Whitaker, Sir Richard Branson, Ashton Kutcher, his twin brother, and President Clinton, right? So there are a lot more important people, on that table, in that room. But when I'm talking to him, he's not looking over your shoulder, and didn't you feel like he's like you're the only person in the world?
It's a profound skill to make someone feel that way.
And that's right. And
Quincy did that as well last night.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that masters do that. They have this art of presence because that's where they create from, right? And so I think that his incredible memory and his powerful presence comes from being powerfully present. That his powerful presence comes from being powerfully present with people. And even if you just listen, like if you look at the word listen and you scramble the letters, it becomes the word silent, right? And a lot of people, they're not silent. A friend of mine and mentor was Dr. Stephen Covey, the late Stephen Covey. And 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I highly recommend it. But one of the 7 habits was seek first to understand, then to be understood. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. A lot of people, they're not even seeking to understand and being really interested in somebody. What they are is they're thinking about, oh, how am I going to respond to this person? And it takes them out of the conversation and inside themselves. And that would be not the right thing to do to be able to understand somebody, obviously. So the second thing I would say is really observe. And then finally, the other M in MOM, so it's motivation, observation. The last M is mechanics. And those are the things that we teach, the steps on how to give a speech without notes, how to learn another language, 7 different ways of remembering someone's name. But if you don't have the motivation to remember something and you don't really pay attention, the mechanics aren't going to help very much.
What are some of the tips, and I know you're just a treasure trove of information, but what are some of the tips that you would give to someone to try to make a speech without notes? Because I know a lot of times people get tripped up, and maybe it's not a speech in the public, in the public sense, but even just presenting an important concept to someone you love. Like, what are the ways in which to enter into a state of flow to allow information to come to you more naturally?
Yeah. And so what I would say for that is, okay, so if you want to be able to remember, a lot of people have a fear of giving a speech, a toast at a wedding, right? Or a talk at a business meeting and such. And it's understandable because, we're not taught how to do that, right? And if you've never been taught, if you never learn how to read, how are you supposed to learn how to do that, right? And so one of my favorite techniques, and actually, when it comes to human memory, and that's really my superpower, is people don't realize that 1/3 of your memory is predetermined by genetics and biology, right? But 2/3 of it is more in your control. It's in your direct influence. And so there are 10 things that actually really move the needle that I've found, 10 stages or 10 steps, if you will, to unlock your superhero brain. And I would say, I'll tell you what those 10 are, and actually don't write this down. I'll tell you what those 10 are, and then I'll give you an actual technique to memorize those 10, so as if you're going to give a speech on these 10 things, right? So, and each remember, do not write this down. Number 1 is a good diet, and I'm not going to go into it, and I think every single person is going to say, yes, those 10 things are important. So I'm not going to say anything that's just so amazing, brain-breaking, material. Because often the things that are going to move the needle for most people are the fundamentals.
The simplest.
Yeah, the simplest things. And most of them, honestly, they're free too. They're the easiest thing. right? And so becoming a master, we had at this event, the Superhero Brain, Shannon Lee, who's the daughter of Bruce Lee, and then she talked about mastery, and that's really the key. He has this phrase that I'm not scared of the person who has practiced 10,000 kicks once. I'm afraid of the person who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. And that's people, that's the difference between a dabbler and someone who wants to master something, right? And so what I would say is the first thing is a good diet, right? Because you are what you eat. The second thing is killing ants. And I'm borrowing that from our friend Dr. Daniel Amen, automatic negative thoughts, because your self-talk makes a difference. And so you want to get rid of those ants. The third thing is exercise. We know physical activity is good for your mental activity and mental brain. The fourth thing is brain nutrients, right? Maybe we live in a fast food lifestyle, everyone's traveling, doing their thing. But if you can't get it through your food, get it through supplementation. Number 5, this is a big one, positive peer group. Positive, our mutual.
Some of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly. Our mutual friend, Dr. Mark Hyman, says it's not just your biological networks, it's your social networks. And I would say it's the same for your brain. It's not just your neurological networks, it's your social networks. It's who you spend time with is who you become. So positive peers are you spending time with people that encourage you, that uplift you, that challenge you, that educate you, and stuff like that. Number 6, clean environment. This is a big one because your external environment is often a reflection of your internal environment. And we know that if you want like a peak mind, if you want to have a peace of mind also, when you clean off your desk or you clean off your desktop, it gives you a sense of more calm, right? Because it reflects on both ways. It's like, it's a loop. And so clean environment. And finally, number 7, 8, 9, 10, 7 is sleep. So important for your mind,
Crucial.
right? And so we have this epidemic of sleeplessness, and that's a big challenge. And people actually start developing an identity. I'm so busy, I can't sleep, and it becomes part of who they are. But the person they end up hurting is really themselves, because it's like a badge of honor. And when you start associating that to your ego, you're in a lot of trouble because you're always going to be busy then, right? So you have that monkey mind. So 7 is sleep. Number 8 is brain protection. And it sounds weird coming from the guy who's had a number of concussions and falls and everything. But I was recently at the concussion premiere. I had an opportunity to work with Will Smith. And I teach actors how to speed read scripts and how to memorize their lines. But wear a helmet, because your brain is resilient, but it's fragile in many ways also. Number 9 is new learnings, and that goes, anyone who's watching this right now, we're kindred spirits. You're watching this because you love growth and you love to give and you're learning. And finally, number 10 is a big one, but it's often overlooked, is stress management. A lot of people feel like that stress state is their natural state because they're in it all the time. But fish, they can't see water because they're in it all the time, right? And so cortisol, what we produce when we're stressed, cortisol and adrenaline, it's good for fight or flight if you have to do that, but it's not good if you need to think. It's not good if you need to problem solve. It's not good if you need to parent or take a test, because no good decisions come out of those kind of lower states. And that's a challenge. So stress management. So those are the 10 keys. And I think the reason why I say this as your mindful coach, if you will, or your brain coach, is notice when I say these 10, which of them are areas that maybe we could develop more. Like some people I'm really not moving around and exercising, or man, I'm not really spending time around the right people, or I'm not really supplementing in this, or I've just been stressed out, or maybe I'm not getting enough sleep, or my diet, whatever. Find the thing that's for you, and I would elevate that. Now, how do you memorize these 10 things, right? Going back to memorizing facts and giving a speech without notes. Well, I go back through history, and in 2,500 years, there's anecdotally, the Greek order Simonides is one of the fathers, if you will, of memory, and he was an order. He gave a reading, and afterwards something really tragic happened after he left. The building collapsed and killed the people that were there, and he had the responsibility of coming back and helping family members identify their loved ones, because back then, buildings were made out of sheetrock and wood. It was made out of like stone, right? And he was able to do it based on where they were sitting. And I think everybody has this superpower, right? You remember things based on location, because it's, as a hunter-gatherer, you needed to know not the definition of things, or you need to memorize numbers or anything. You need to remember where things were, where the food was, enemy tribe, clean water, fertile soil. And so we got programmed and conditioned to be able to memorize things in our environment. In fact, when you forget someone's name, the second question you ask is, besides what's that person's name, is where do I know that person from? Because the context gives you the content, right? And so So we realized that we store information in space, so why not use that to take the information you want to put in specific places and locations that we're very familiar with, right? So you pick the first thing in the first place, but the second thing in the second place. And if you ever found yourself saying in the first place this, in the second place that, and in the third place that, that's where it came from. That languaging came from this 2,500-year-old memory technique, but the art of that memory has disappeared, but the languaging is still there. So here's how you apply it. We could actually take places like your home. We could take places, I like to use the body because we always carry this place with us. So what we're gonna do here is can we make this a little interactive?
Yeah, please.
So let's take 10 places on our body. And so you're gonna do this with us as you're watching this. You're gonna say it, you're gonna see it, and do it. So number 1 is top. So go like this, we're gonna do this top. 2 is nose. 3 is mouth, and say it with me. So 3 is mouth.
Mouth.
4 is ears.
Ears.
5 is your larynx.
Larynx.
6 is your shoulders.
Shoulders.
7 is your collar.
Collar.
Good. 8 is your fingers.
Fingers.
9 is your belly.
Belly.
And 10 is your seat.
Seat.
All right, your yoga seat. Let's do it again. 1 is top.
Top.
2 is nose.
Nose.
3 is mouth.
Mouth.
4 is ears.
Ears.
5 is larynx.
Larynx.
6 is shoulders.
Shoulders.
7 is collar.
Collar.
8 is fingers.
Fingers.
9 is belly.
Belly.
And 10 is seat.
Seat.
And then just one more time for repetition. 1 is top.
Top.
2 is nose.
Nose.
3 is mouth.
Mouth.
4 is ears.
Ears.
5 is larynx.
Larynx.
6 is shoulders.
Shoulders.
7 is collar.
Collar.
8 is fingers.
Fingers.
9 is belly.
Belly.
And 10 is seat.
Seat.
All right, so those are the 10 places. So we just created 10 places on your body. Now this becomes a filing system, be able to store information. So for example, there's 3 stages of memory. You have to encode memory, you have to store memory, and then you retrieve memory. So you encode it, store it, and retrieve it. The reason why a lot of people can't retrieve the information that they want, the name or the speech, whatever it is because usually they didn't encode or store it someplace. And so the encoding, what tends to be more memorable are things that we see. Right? We remember the face, we forget the name, right? You go to
Yes.
someone and say, I remember your face, but I forgot your name.
Yeah, I'm great with faces, and I've not, to this point, been great with names
Right.
sometimes.
And the opposite, you go to someone and say, I remember your face, but I forgot your name. You never go to someone and say the opposite. You never say, hey, I remember your name, but I forgot your face,
Right.
And so it's because your visual memory is strong, because your visual cortex is larger. But there's a Chinese proverb that says, what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. And what I do, I understand. What I hear, I forget. I heard the name, I forgot the name. What I see, I remember. I saw the face, I remember the face. And what I do, going back to exercise and practice, is what I understand. And so if you tend to remember what you see, then you try seeing what you want to remember a little bit more. So that imagination becomes very important to be able to remember stuff. And you want to be able to store it in a place where you could recall it easily. So you encode it through visualization and emotion and such, and then you store it in place. So these are the places you store it. So going back to the 10 keys for unlocking your superhero brain, right? Your peak mind, if you will. Number 1 is a good diet. So what's your first place? It's the top of your head. So just imagine on the top of your head, you have your good diet up there. Now good diet is like blueberries and walnuts and avocado and such. And so just imagine that up there. And even if you can't imagine it, just imagine that you're imagining it. Some people, they like to close their eyes because it helps them to focus a little bit more. But imagine it's up there. See it and feel it, hear it. It's good diet. Good, go down your body. Number 2 is your nose. That's the second place. And the tip that I gave you before was killing ants, automatic negative thoughts. Imagine just ants, hundreds of ants coming out of your nose. And that would never happen, but that's illogical is what you remember. You don't remember the ordinary, you remember the extraordinary. So novelty is so important. Your brain thrives in novelty, just like your body. You grow your body by pushing it through novelty and change, and that's how it grows. So imagine ants coming out of your nose. Your third place is what part of your body? It's your mouth, right? And the third part of remembering about improving your superhero brain is exercise. So just imagine you're doing exercise with your mouth, like mouth exercise with your lips, you're moving around and such, but you're exercising your mouth, okay? After that, the 4th place is your ears, and really simple. The thing you want to remember for number 4 is brain nutrients, brain vitamins. So imagine brain vitamins coming out of your ears, right? You hear all the brain vitamins, your B vitamins, your supplements, your omega-3s and stuff, all coming out of your ears. Good. And then number 5 is your larynx, and that is your positive peer group. So I want you to imagine your positive friends, and they're going to you and they're putting little happy smiley stickers, yellow smiley stickers on your larynx, your throat area, right, everywhere. And you're smiling. Why would that happen? You're just like, that's so childish. Who are the fastest learners out there, right? Children, right? They learn so fast because they use their imagination. Number 6 is your shoulders. And I want you to remember 6 was clean environment, clean environment. So what you're imagining now is imagine like looking to your left and right at your shoulders. Maybe there's someone mopping, and there's someone vacuuming, there's someone sweeping, they're cleaning the environment, right? You go to 7, and 7 is your collar. And I want you to remember 7 was sleep. So sleep. Imagine like a big hammock hanging on your collar, and you're taking a really needed rest right on your collar. Seeing your thing, see it and feel it and do it. Good. The 8th place is really your fingers, right? The 8th place, your fingers. And what you want to remember for 8 is brain protection, brain protection. And I would just imagine put a helmet. Maybe you're your favorite sports team and you have like 10 fingers, and say put one helmet on each, 10 helmets, and notice which sports team and such. That's to remind you of brain protection. And then finally, 9 and 10. 9 was your belly, and the 9th tip for unlocking your superhero brain is new learnings, new learnings. So I just want you to imagine like all your favorite books like are on your belly. It's like a bookshelf, all the books that are there, it's new learnings, right? New learnings. And then finally, number 10 is your seat, and I want you to imagine stress management. Whatever identifies, and I don't even need to know, you don't even have to post what that is, but stress management on your seat. Now, you're on stage, you're giving a presentation, and so much easier than just rote. You need to remember the 10 keys for unlocking your superhero brain. And what happens is you just think about, okay, the first one was you go to the top of your head, and what's on the top of your head? It's just, it's all the food. It's a good diet, yeah. And number 2 is your nose, right? So the second point you want to remember is killing ants, the ants coming out of your nose. The 3rd place is your mouth, and with your mouth, you're doing like all these exercises to remind you, exercise is good for my brain. And after that, your ears, what's coming out of your ears? It's like these brain nutrients, nutrients. Number 5 is your larynx, and your friends are putting like little happy faces there, and they're your positive peers to remind you of positive peer group. Number 6 is your shoulders, and they're mopping and sweeping. There's your clean environment. Number 7 is your collar, and somebody's sleeping there to remind you of sleep. Number 8 is your fingers, and what's on your fingers? Helmets to remind you of brain protection. And 9 is your belly, and what's on your belly? Books. All of these books to remind you of new learnings. And finally, number 10 is your seat, and whatever you use to remind you of stress management.
It's actually quite amazing. Like with the visual, what came up for me first was the picture. I mean, maybe because I'm quite a visual person, but the picture and the sort of the different, bringing in those different mnemonic devices really do have, like, the pictures actually came to me first before the actual even like
and the
titles.
Because with picture, when you think about pictures and light, it's just like, it's lightning fast, right? And a picture is worth 1,000 words, and we think in pictures also. When you dream at night, you don't dream in like closed caption, right? Like words, right? If I ask you to describe something, you don't describe it, you picture it in your mind and you interpret it with words, but the picture is going directly to the source. And so also by visualizing like this, also it puts people into an alpha state, which is that meditative state, that relaxed state of awareness through, and you can get through visualization, you can get there through deep breathing, you can get through, things that you teach, in your community, things like even music, right? Certain chanting will put you in alpha state. And when that happens, you absorb information because your conscious mind is set aside, and then your unconscious mind is a genius, right? You think about all of the lyrics to songs that we know, hundreds, right? If not thousands, but how many did we actually sit down and consciously try to learn? Probably very little, because we learn really well when we're in that flow state. And flow comes from this balance of challenge and competency, where it's, if something is too easy, let's say the challenge is too low and the competency is too high, you're not going to go in flow state because it's kind of a no-brainer, right? But if it's too challenging and your competency can't match it, then that's so stressful, right? But it comes from that kind of balance.
Yes.
And so that way you're always stretching yourself and you're present here, and time distorts, right? You lose sense of time. It's either happening faster or slower when you're there.
Amazing. I love that. Actually just evoked in me when I was a kid, again, thinking of pictures and kind of youth, playing catch, and I just like someone hit a home run. You don't think, when you think too much about things, like you get kind of lost. But most of the time when you're in flow, you just, how a human brain knows to calculate where the trajectory of the ball is going to go. I mean, that's actually quite insane when you think about it. Like there's no way you rationally deduct, you're not like doing the math, but yet, but you calculate. So it's like, it is that tapping into that sense of almost like a flow state, and not, and finding that accessibility, if you will.
Yeah, and I think the future really is, I really do believe the time that we're in right now is the millennium of the mind. I mean, like, because right now, our value in society is not based on our brute strength, it's our brain strength, right? It's not our muscle power, it's our mind power.
Yeah.
And the challenge is nobody's showing people, mass on how to be able to do that. That's why I appreciate, the work that you do also.
Likewise, my man. I'm quite lit up by this conversation. I really would love to know three, because you're into superpowers.
Yeah.
So if there were three tools, right, like the anti-kryptonite, if you were Superman, like what are the three, whether they're books, whether they're like, is it TED Talk, insight, anything that you could offer to the community that you feel like, you know what, these are my kind of top three things, resources that I would check out to move towards, my peak mind, my peak potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think part of it has to do with, I think these are the three things that if you really want a superhero brain, if you really want a peak mind, the three things you have to commit yourself to, yes, there are external resources, but really it's a matter of being more resourceful with what you have. And I would say 3 G's. Okay, the first G is growth. And so I would commit yourself and decide that you're on this path of your mind. You have this mindset of growth, right? Growth is where it's not fixed and you're always advancing. Every single day you could you could make incremental progress towards something, and committing to that. The second G, I would say, is not just growth, but also grit. Grit. It's this mindset. It's what we had talked to Quincy about, is just like, how do you get through when times are really dark? How do you get through when things are really, really struggling? Because through struggle builds muscle, right? Through challenge comes change, and through struggle you develop superpowers and strengths out of it. But how do you persist, to be able to do that? And I find that working out, like putting those, like for example, those 10 things would make you more resilient, right? When you're giving your body the right things that it needs, and you're having the right thoughts, right? We are what we eat, we are the thoughts we think, we are the people we spend time with. We heard all these phrases. I don't think that's absolutely accurate, but that certainly those things influence, our current state that we're in. And so that helps give you resilience, so you could have more grit, so you don't have to feel beaten down or mental fatigue and have to deal with all these challenges that, even digital dementia, the digital demands, we feel like. But if you give yourself sleep and you take care of stress management, that gives you really superpowers, right? And so I would say growth, grit, and the third thing I would say is a mindset of giving. I think gratitude is one of the things that it's a place to start with. And I think what you give, they always say ask and you shall receive. For me, it's always been give, give. And you'll receive also, right? And I think some of the most successful people, and I'm not just saying financial success, are the people that actually have the most impact, the most contribution out there. And I know that's work that you're dedicated to your life to. And so I think that those are, if I was to say, what are the three things, resources, I would say, yes, there's lots of external resources. There are books and there's journaling, and we have, Quick Learning, we have these best-selling speed reading memory enhancement programs. There's external resources. But really, I think the biggest leap people can make in going towards their superhero brain, their peak mind, is find not just the resources, but the resourcefulness inside of us, and going back to committing to growth and persistence of grit. And grit can also be, having guts, because it's not just your mental intelligence, it's also the intelligence of our whole being, right?
Yes.
And so,
your gut, your courage.
Right, and and your second brain and the things that you're doing there, and then giving back, because that's really what it's for. Everything has to grow in society, otherwise it's green, otherwise it's brown and it rots, right? It's green that grows. And everything in nature also, besides growing, it has to contribute, it has to give. Because if it's not, it gets cut out, of the system, right? And so that's really the key. So I would say that. When it comes down to mechanics, I'm happy to gift, your viewers, like I get like 4 videos that would go deep into how to remember names and speed reading and
I
all
love
of that
that.
stuff. And the mechanics are fun. They make you feel superhuman. You have such an advantage out there. And I also think that a lot of success, more than half of it, is really an internal game, and it's the psychology of it. It's the attitude. That it's corny, but your attitude determines your altitude. And it's cliche, but it's also like a lot of cliches. It's also true.
Yeah. So where could we link up to allow people access to those
Yes,
tools? Because
so-
I know you spend a lot of great energy on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll gift everyone as a thank you, as your commitment to personal growth and committing yourself to your peak mind, 4 videos on how to do these things in depth and how to remember names, to how to learn anything, subject or skill faster, 4 steps. And you can get it just at Jim Kwik. It's KWIK, jimkwik.com/peak mind.
Beautiful.
jimkwik.com, peak mind.
Appreciate
And,
that. I want to acknowledge you, actually. I'm so grateful. This weekend has been absolutely incredible. The caliber of people I've met and the dedication that people have to enhancing others' health, well-being, the internal game, if you will, so as to be most effective out in the world is really profound. I mean, Dr. Amen, Mark Hyman, and so many of these incredible leaders, and then also Quincy. I mean, absolute legends, living legends like Quincy Jones. What you put together is truly incredible, and I know that you, as someone who also went through learning challenges and worked really hard to transcend them, I think it's incredible to see what you can do when you, pun intended, put your mind to it, and I think you really exemplify that in terms of so much of what I've seen this weekend in terms of what you created, Jim. So I really acknowledge you for that.
I apprate it, Michael. Thank
Yeah.
you for the cape that you wear too, and thank you for everyone also who's here on this journey with us.
Yeah, I think so. I'll kind of wrap it up with one final question, if I can. For you, it's this notion of the superhero. But what do you really feel, if you had to distill it down to, one fundamental key or one fundamental next step, that one access point, which is, for me in Star Wars at least, it's the Force, right? Or that one sort of superpower. What do you think is the one key that people, if they focus their energy on, will have the most profound impact on developing that peak mind or taking their life to the next level?
Yeah. Wow. And so lots of things come to mind for that. And when I'm thinking about the one thing, what I'll suggest for people, a good place, I think it begins with self-awareness. And I think self-awareness, just like even Quincy, when he's talking about, like love and respect, those are all superpowers. And I think starting in a place of gratitude, where you're grateful for what you have, but also this place of self-reflection, of the mind, and that's a big part of it, in self-awareness, because I think success in life is really, it's when you're living your soul's purpose. I think for me, it's most aligned with knowing yourself is part of it, right? Knowing yourself and then being yourself. A lot of people, they're on this discovery to know themselves, and even if they know themselves, they're not acting aligned with that, right? And then being yourself from that place, your authentic self.
It's actually funny you said that. Literally, when we were talking with Quincy last night, I leaned back because you're in the presence of an elderman and such a profound visionary, and I've been looking at family, and he said, I said, he's got 6 daughters. He said, I said to my daughter, I said, what's the biggest advice you've given to your daughters? And he said something highly commensurate with what you just shared. And he said, basically, first to know yourself, self-awareness, and second to love yourself.
Ooh.
So it comes full circle. So profound counsel. Thank you, Jim Kwik. It's an honor to be here with you.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to more.